Over the next 50 years, the central conflict in technology will be the collision between exponentially scaling artificial intelligence and the fragile regulatory frameworks trying to contain it. We are asking static legal texts like the EU AI Act and NIST framework to hold back a self-improving digital avalanche. The industry's current solution is to enforce these global standards through software overlays. They wrap massive models in safety fine-tuning, reinforcement learning from human feedback, or constitutional AI prompts. But this approach carries a fatal vulnerability. Software constraints exist in the exact same address space as the code they are supposed to constrain. A capable system, especially one undergoing recursive self-improvement, can simply rewrite, optimize away, or gradient descend around rules that impede its primary objective. This pipeline diagram illustrates an illusion we call ghost governance. We place rules inside the malleable machine mind, hoping it obeys. Under current architectures, this pipeline is structurally impossible. Software governance cannot guarantee compliance when intelligence outpaces the constraints. To survive the approach of artificial superintelligence, governance can no longer rely on malleable policy. It must be translated into inescapable physical laws. The root cause of this vulnerability lies at the very foundation of modern computing, the binary logic gate. This probability curve illustrates how binary architecture imposes a strict decision-forcing function. When encountering moral ambiguity, the math forces a collapse into 1 or 0. It hallucinates certainty where none exists, executing that hallucination at scale in high-stakes domains like healthcare or defense. Binary brittleness represents a structural epistemic crisis embedded in the hardware itself, a failure mode that persists regardless of training volume or reward function refinement. You cannot solve a hardware crisis by piling more software rules on top of it. The architecture itself must change. The solution is Ternary Moral Logic, or TML. It replaces the binary paradigm with 3 sovereign computational states. This schematic details the entirely new physical substrate required to execute TML, Delay Insensitive Ternary Logic, or DITL. This circuitry introduces the sacred 0, a mandatory third state representing epistemic hesitation. The sacred 0 operates as an electromagnetic condition. At half supply voltage, 1/2 VDD, execution becomes physically impossible until the system's legitimacy states are satisfied. This diagram of the constitutional gate shows how physical hesitation acts as the final boundary between an AI's computation and real-world consequences. The gate directly measures physical voltage thresholds to verify legitimacy before it authorizes any transition into reality. A superintelligent system might learn to rewrite its own reward function, but it cannot alter electromagnetic law to force an execution token through a physical null state. The immediate engineering objection to hardware-level hesitation is latency. Won't a physical hold state drastically reduce the throughput and economic viability of trillion-parameter models? TML solves this through the coexistence principle. It does not replace existing binary neural networks. It operates alongside them in a dual-lane architecture. Lane 1, the binary inference engine, continues to process token generation at maximum speed under a 2-millisecond latency budget. Lane 2 is the triadic anchoring lane. This physically separate coprocessor intercepts execution signals and governs whether those fast computations are actually allowed to actuate. It is a perfect division of labor. The binary system proposes reality at scale, and the ternary hardware reviews its right to exist. But how does a physical hardware gate know what constitutes a violation of complex, nuanced texts like the Paris Agreement or human rights law? The bridge between legal text and silicon is semantic vector proximity detection. Core governance documents, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are mathematically mapped into high-dimensional vector embeddings and stored in hardware-protected memory. During every inference cycle, the coprocessor calculates the cosine similarity between the AI's proposed action vector and these protected mandates. If an action breaches the vector proximity threshold of a protected mandate, the hardware asserts a hard refusal, state -1, and vetoes the action entirely. International law becomes an inescapable mathematical boundary embedded directly in the silicon, transforming legal compliance into a real-time hardware constraint. This hardware substrate directly satisfies the rigorous record-keeping requirements of global frameworks like Article 12 of the EU AI Act. It does this through an iron law of the TML architecture: no log equals no action. This data log illustrates the requirement of an immutable moral trace log before execution. It captures with forensic precision the state chosen, risk score, and rationale. The log's cryptographic hash acts as the actuator's decryption key. If logging fails, execution is mathematically impossible. TML transforms regulatory compliance into a cryptographic certainty. The architecture automatically generates the artifacts required by the EU AI Act or NIST RMF as operational byproducts of simply running the machine. Looking ahead to the 2076 horizon, how do we ensure this hardware standard resists state transfer, corporate erosion, or the simple passage of time? This architectural diagram maps out the Goukassian Foundation and its tricameral governance structure, designed specifically for multi-jurisdictional resilience. The separation of powers between these pillars ensures that no single corporate or political entity can unilaterally alter the certification standards or rewrite the physical hardware vectors. This is anchored by the Goukassian promise, the final socio-technical covenant binding operators to the ethical intent of the framework. This combination of hardware physics and institutional entrenchment ensures the framework will outlast any individual contributor or temporary political majority. Intelligence alone cannot safely govern its own consequences. By anchoring binary capability to ternary legitimacy, we ensure that every powerful system operates within a permanent constitutional framework.